And in three, two, one.
You are now listening to the Lapsed Graps podcast.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode 17 of Lab Scraps. That's weird. We have not been doing this for 17 weeks. That's very strange. A podcast where I, Sam, a person who watches pro wrestling, sit down with my friend.
I almost call myself Sam. What's happening today? Jam, who doesn't?
And we discuss the wacky week that was in professional wrestling. A little bit of behind the scenes. We are losing our minds here because it took us 20 minutes to get Skype to connect. So if this is a very strange episode, blame Skype and Microsoft, and it's all Bill Gates' fault. We didn't do anything wrong. It's all Bill Gates.
And another behind the scenes tidbit, it actually is like a weekly thing that takes us about 20 minutes to get going because there's always a technical difficulty happening.
Yeah, but we weren't supposed to tell them that. That was just going to be like a big, like, oh, okay, they had issues. It's not supposed to be they're always having issues and it's just affecting them more this week. Come on now, Jam.
Oh yeah, you're right. Edit point. I say edit point, but I'm gonna keep it in.
Yeah, you'll keep things in if I beg you to leave them out, but then if you flub like half a word, you're like, oh nope, I gotta Frankenstein that.
That's a fact.
Oh yeah, that's why you should never give over complete edit control to someone else. Just always control your edit, kids. Always control your edit. But that'll bring us into our first segment, which is the news of wrestling for the week, which actually got really crazy really fast. That's what happens when you have a major pay-per-view and building to a major pay-per-view, and mostly people are just bored. So the first bit of news for the week was that World Wrestling Entertainment has relocated the upcoming WrestleMania 37 from Los Angeles SoFi Stadium to Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida. Now, this is something that I reported on like 2.5 months ago that this was rumored to be happening. So, hey, I'm right. Claps for me. It works out. But yeah, no, they lost out on a ton of tourism dollars in Tampa, and WWE lost out on a lot of money. And Tampa is one of the only places that's allowing fans to return to stadiums right now in large numbers. So it makes sense for them to go to Tampa, where the coronavirus restrictions are lax, than to stay in Los Angeles and spend all this money renting out the stadium that only 1,000 people are going to be in. Makes a lot of sense. It actually helps out indie wrestling a little bit. Don't go to this WrestleMania. It's not worth it. Just don't go. Next year's WrestleMania is going to be in Dallas. It's going to be great. Hopefully we'll all be vaccinated and we'll be able to get together and get drunk in bars and watch people punch each other in the face. It is not worth going to WrestleMania this year in Raymond James Stadium. I know a lot of people have been waiting for WrestleMania to come to Tampa so they can go watch people jump off the pirate ship. I get that. It's not socially responsible to go to WrestleMania this year.
Has that been confirmed that they're gonna have like fans, or rather, they're gonna have like a full capacity of fans?
Full capacity has not been confirmed. There is confirmation that tickets are going to be sold, or are currently being sold. I haven't seen anything about the cap on ticket sales. I know Florida is operating right now on a personal prudence policy. So, like, if you think you can safely fill a stadium, technically, according to Florida law, you're allowed to, which is why the Buccaneers playoff games are so lit right now, because they're just packing people in there. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting watching it this year because you're going to know it's going to feel like old WrestleManias, while most of my friends that are into wrestling who are on the more left-leaning side of the spectrum of politics in general, and very much so this virus, although it's not really a left or right thing, it's just a more do you believe in science or not thing, are going to be terrified of this WrestleMania.
Yeah, full capacity or half capacity just seems like a bad idea at this point. Like there's some light with the vaccinations, light at the end of the tunnel, and people are saying that by the summer or by the fall, things are gonna look at least halfway close to normal. I'm a little cynical, so I'm thinking that's a stretch, but WrestleMania, I'm guessing, is late March, early April, like it usually is. So, doing that then would be too soon. Like I feel like most of the public isn't even going to get their vaccinations until March or April. So trying to like rush the process. And wasn't it just like 2 weeks ago that Drew McIntyre caught COVID? So like you already had a wrestler who caught COVID backstage with no fans. Imagine that capacity doubled with just half a stadium of fans, and it's it sounds like bad news.
Yeah, that was actually last week that Drew McIntyre announced that he had COVID because he didn't appear on shows this week either, completing that mandatory 2 week program. So we're not sure if he'll be returning in this coming week. It's almost certain that he's going to miss Royal Rumble at this point. I don't see how they could keep him off of Raw and most likely SmackDown tonight as you're listening to this, and then have him show up at the Royal Rumble and think that's a good idea. It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me in that way. But yeah, no, it's just no part of WrestleMania 37 seems like a good idea. Either going or even being in that city with that influx, because if you open up WrestleMania for people to buy tickets, people are going to show up because that it's WrestleMania. That's what you do, and they're going to think it's their personal privacy, or not personal privacy, but their God-given right to go watch wrestling during a global pandemic. Because whatever, who cares? Uh, so I personally would stay far, far away from the city and far, far away from that stadium. But again, you're all adults. Well, most of you are adults, and you're going to do what you want to do. But that'll bring us to our next piece of news that actually ties into the pay-per-view for the week, which was Hard to Kill over on the Impact side. Madison Rayne, who is a legend of the Impact Knockouts division, and has most recently been filling her duties as a member of the Impact commentary team, officially announced her retirement from professional wrestling. So she is a 5-time Impact Knockouts champion and a 3-time Knockout Tag Team champion. She's a legend in professional wrestling, women's professional wrestling specifically. And I think maybe the best women's professional wrestler to never do anything significant with the WWE. I mean, she had that one run in the second Mae Young Classic where she went out in the first round, but that's really her only foray into that company. Most of her, actually not most, all of her notoriety within the world of professional wrestling has been made in promotions like Impact, Shimmer, Ring of Honor for a very brief period of time, places like that where she was able to kind of do what she wanted with her character and be just this badass kind of like grappling chick that didn't have to be sexy or sultry or do those things that WWE was doing in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I guess what are your feelings on Madison Rayne officially hanging up the boots and walking away from the business of pro wrestling, at least in front of the camera?
Well, I think she's always been like a super talented wrestler, and I think that she's probably exceeded expectations more than most women that's probably been doing it for a decade plus. Like, I'm not sure anybody, when she debuted with the Beautiful People in '08, '07, whenever that was, I don't think anybody imagined her carving out a career for herself across the globe, across different wrestling organizations for a decade plus in WWE, Shimmer, and all these different organizations. And and I think she's won a couple Impact Tag titles, Impact Women's Championship, I'm sorry, Impact Knockouts Championships, and she's had a pretty successful career. So if she wants to hang up now, especially if she's doing, last I saw, she was doing like commentary for Impact too. So if she wants to do stuff behind the scenes some more, then you can probably argue that she's had a Hall of Fame career just from her work in the ring and behind the camera.
Absolutely. But speaking of talented women athletes, NXT announced the signings of 3 indie talents this week: Lacey Ryan, Elena Black, and what I thought was the most shocking announcement, Priscilla Kelly has signed with NXT. Priscilla Kelly, notably the ex-wife of Darby Allin, the current AEW TNT champion, and she was the one of the first part of, I believe, the first women's match in AEW history at All In, and then was one of the only women's matches that was shown during the Jericho Cruise kind of section of AEW last summer. So she's been very intertwined with that company from its inception. And it's very interesting to see that NXT has come and offered her a contract out from under them, and to see if, I don't know if we'll ever get a real story there and find out if AEW offered her a contract and she turned it down, or if they just never thought that she was worth offering a contract to and allowed NXT to kind of pull her away. But that is a huge boon for NXT. And Elena Black is incredibly talented. I'm not super familiar with Lacey Ryan's work, but Elena Black and Priscilla Kelly alone are going to elevate that women's division to whole new heights.
I'm not familiar with Elena Black and Lacey Ryan, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those names, but I'm very familiar with Priscilla Kelly, and I'm like you, I'm very shocked that she'd signed with WWE. Not that they wouldn't want her, but I figured that if she was gonna go WWE, she would have been there like 2, 3 years ago when she was in the first or second Mae Young Classic. Because up to that point, she was on like a big hot streak of just showing up pretty much everywhere. And when she didn't show up, and then she ended up in AEW, I'm thinking, oh, the next logical step is her being signed by AEW. That's obviously not the case, but given her charisma, given what skills she has in the character department, and of course the in-ring department, I think she's gonna be super successful in NXT. That's a big grab.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's definitely a huge get for them, and it's very, very interesting to see where they're going to be taking this women's division. They are suffering, obviously, from the very typical NXT disease, which is wrestler bloat. They have so many people and just not enough hours of television to properly showcase everyone they have. They have signees from like the beginning of the pandemic that still haven't debuted, that were very much wrestlers like previously. It's not like they brought in a bunch of like D1 athletes and are training them right now, but they had guys that they signed and brought in that just haven't made debuts yet. So it's going to be interesting to see how soon these girls debut and what kind of push they're given off the bat. If they're put into a main event spot and kind of pushing out the likes of Xia Li and Dakota Kai, and people that are middling characters, or if they're kind of just brought in to support from underneath and then allowed to kind of grow naturally. But that's going to bring us to Hard to Kill, which was Impact's pay-per-view event for the evening. This was a notable pay-per-view for two reasons. It was the crowning of the new Knockout Tag Team Champions, which is a belt that they revived last year and have been holding a week-to-week tournament for the last 8 weeks or so to figure out who was going to be in the finals. And it also saw a massive six-man tag team main event between AEW World Champion Kenny Omega, the Impact Tag Team Champions, the Good Brothers, and Impact World Champion Rich Swann, then Chris Sabin, who's a former Tag Team Champion, and Moose. Now, Moose was brought in because Chris Sabin's tag team partner was unable to compete, so he was kind of thrown in at the last second, which was, unfortunate. You would have liked to have seen the Impact World Champion, AEW World Champion, and then both like the former Impact Tag Team Champions and the current Tag Team Champions kind of mix it up in there, but Moose actually held his own. But to start off with the top of the card, we had the return of Decay, which is Rosemary and Crazy Steve's intergender tag team, defeating Tennille Dashwood and Caleb with a K. Caleb with a K is a signing that they've made in the last year. Tennille Dashwood has also re-debuted with the company in the last year, and they've both had pushes to varying successes. Tennille came into the promotion, or I guess re-entered the promotion, with huge wins over Jordan Grace right after she dropped the Knockouts title to current champion Deonna Purrazzo. So, she came in strong and has kind of built that together. Caleb with a K is currently operating as her valet slash photographer right now, and hasn't really done a lot of singles wrestling, but he's a very talented indie wrestler in his own right. This was just really cool to see Rosemary and Crazy Steve kind of work back together, especially since Crazy Steve had that exit with the company in 2006, 2007, and hasn't really done much since coming back to Impact, and seeing Rosemary kind of get in there and really show that she is just as good as some of the women that are pushed a little higher on the card was really cool to see.
All right, that's really dope. I'm not super familiar with Caleb with a K. In fact, I'm not familiar with him at all, so I can't speak to his dynamic with Tennille Dashwood. But I remember the K had a really great run, like you said, 2016, 2017, with the Hardys most memorably, and they had tag team titles. They also had Abyss with them, but obviously Abyss isn't there right now. Last I heard, he was doing some stuff for AJ Styles in WWE, but
Hmm.
with Decay now coming back, I think that's super cool, especially if they can capture that kind of unique charm that they had back like 3, 4 years ago, whenever that was, even minus Abyss. Like they very, very unique characters in the ring and just in like backstage segments. So if they can recapture that, that would be super cool. Was this like a surprise thing, or was this like something they built to in like past
This
weeks?
this has been building in the last couple of weeks. They reunited when Crazy Steve came back into the promotion, like very in passing, where it was like, oh hey, I know you. Oh hey, I know you, because obviously Rosemary is a demon living in 6 different timelines now. I think is the thing where she has 6 different active timelines going on in her head, and Crazy Steve is crazy. So they were passing ships in the night. They were both in Wrestle House, but didn't really interact very much. And then when they got out of Wrestle House is when they kind of started to regroup and team together.
Does this look like a permanent thing, or was it just like a one-time only for a tag team?
So that's where it's going to get interesting, because I think if there was a promotion that was going to bring like an intergender title to the US, it's going to be Impact. And I feel like with the level of teams they're putting together, because Caleb is an incredible wrestler, Tennille is an incredible wrestler, Rosemary and Crazy Steve are incredible wrestlers, and they have other teams that they could build over in other parts of the card. I think that would be a really interesting way to kind of give some people that are maybe secondary or tertiary characters and more TV time. So if they do go that route, then I do think they'll stick together. Right now, though, it kind of looks like, hey, you don't like Tennille and I don't like this Caleb guy. Let's just go beat them up. And that'll bring us to our next match, which is Violent by Design, which is Eric Young's current stable, which is himself, Joe Doring, and Diener, which I believe is Jake Diener, because the other one was named in Speaking Out. So it looks like Cody Deaner is the one that is now currently going by just Deaner, and that his tag team partner is the one that was named in Speaking Out and kind of broke up the whole Deaner compound stable that included the person they defeated in this 6-man tag match, Cousin Jake, Rhino, and Tommy Dreamer. So when the Deaners kind of imploded, obviously due to off-screen issues, Cousin Jake went off and did his own thing, and is now teaming with Rhino and Tommy Dreamer. It was an okay match. Eric Young being a former Impact World Champion, and an older gentleman. We've talked about this every time we talk about Impact Wrestling. He's getting ready for his goodbye tour, it seems. And the more we see him, the more it feels like he's really just kind of counting down the days until his Impact run is done and he can go sit on his front porch somewhere and just hang out. It was an okay match. I don't know if it would have been a match I would have put on the main card for Hard to Kill, but it wasn't too bad.
I'm surprised Eric Young's still there because I think the last time we talked about him was that Bound for Glory match, and maybe I think you might have said he had like a rematch like the week after, and we all thought that was gonna be his like farewell thing, but for him still going like 4 months later, it makes me wonder like what else is there to do unless he just really likes wrestling, but like he's gotta be up there in age where like any year now would have to be like a goodbye tour, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well. Because, like you said, he lost his title clean to Rich Swann at Bound for Glory, and then on the Tuesday following Bound for Glory, so like 48 hours later, he cashed in his rematch clause with no fanfare, no like anything from commentary to let us know this was happening. It just happened, and then he lost that clean as well. So that's where I kind of thought, okay, he went out twice in 3 days on his back clean. He's done. He's leaving the promotion, but he's still hanging around. So I'm not really sure what Eric Young's aspirations are or his plans are. It'll be interesting to see just how long he sticks with it, though. And that'll bring us to our third match on the card, which was Fire and Flava, which is Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steele's tag team facing off with Havoc and Nevaeh, who are the current what is that company called? It's the guy who started Glow has a different all women's wrestling company, and they're the tag team champions there.
The TV
Um,
show?
the actual wrestling show from the 80s, like
Oh.
the guy who started the actual show in the 80s has another one. Uh, Wow Women of Wrestling. Yes. Okay, so
Oh.
they are the current Wow Women of Wrestling tag team champions as of the last time that show recorded, which was 2019. And they lost to Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steeles in a pretty good match. Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steeles are definitely the younger pair. They seem much less synchronized in their movements together. Like it's very clear that Havoc and Nevaeh have been working as an indie tag team for the better part of 3 or 4 years, and that Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steeles are still feeling each other out. But I do think this is a good move, putting the straps on them and giving the tag division not only a fresh young face, but a much less white face. Because I don't know if how much interaction with like early 2000s TNA you had, but it was a lot of white ladies holding those straps. And the fact that they're starting off the division after ending it by giving it to a white lady and a dude, by giving it to two people of color who are incredibly talented, really good on the mic, and have that energy and the youthfulness to go and pull really cool matches out with anybody they put in front of them, I think is a really important step forward in the world of wrestling, and especially the world of Impact Wrestling.
I completely agree with that. And to piggyback off that, I'll also say that, like, from what I vaguely remember, I think Tasha Steeles and Kiera Hogan debuted as a tag team either right before the pandemic or like just as it was getting going. And in the same respects that like Bailey and Sasha Banks kind of injected energy into these crowdless shows, Tasha and Kiera Hogan did a lot of that for the crowdless Impact shows, and it
Hmm.
seems like with all the work they did to like inject life into the company at the time, it's kind of being like rewarded in the same sense. Again, same sense that Bailey and Sasha Banks were kind of rewarded with getting all the belts. So for them to be rewarded with them getting the inaugural or I guess rebooted inaugural knockouts tag team championships,
Hmm.
then it's very well deserved, and I can see them having like a really nice run with those belts.
Yeah, and Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steeles kind of aligning themselves together and working together early in the pandemic is what brought a lot of people to Impact and made them go, "Oh wait, didn't you guys used to have a women's tag team title like for your women's division? You have all these incredible women that are pairing off. Why not bring that back?" And so a lot of people are giving credit to Fire and Flava for actually pushing Impact in the direction of bringing back the titles in the first place. And that brings us to our next match, which is Ace Austin, accompanied by Madman Fulton, facing off against the debuting Matt Cardona. Cardona was part of the massive layoffs with the WWE at the beginning of the pandemic. Had a very brief run in AEW where he kind of worked as Cody's enforcer for like 2 weeks and then just sort of dropped off TV, didn't really show up anywhere. Everyone was wondering if he was negotiating re-signing with the WWE since they were bringing back all these people they fired. And it turns out he ended up following his good buddy over to Impact Wrestling. This was an okay match. I mean, Ace Austin is a talented guy. He's how do I put this? He is the Bush Light of MJF to me. He's not as satisfying or as enjoyable, but if it's all you got, I'll drink it. You know what I mean? Uh, so I'm not a huge Ace Austin fan, at least not an Impact. His MLW stuff is really, really good, but they're also allowed to curse on MLW, which I think with a lot of heels allows them a little bit more free range. And with Ace Austin, it definitely does. He seems like the kind of guy that even outside of the wrestling ring, fuck is every other word out of his mouth. And when you hamper him by saying you can't say that word, it kind of kills where he's able to go creatively. This was a good match.
I forget who is Matt Cardona. I'm trying to remember who is
Zack
that.
Ryder.
Oh, of course. Right. Okay. That's cool then. So that means he's doing a tag team with Brian Myers is his name now?
So Brian and Matt have not interacted on screen yet. Matt made his debut against Ace Austin in this match, and as of Tuesday night, they have not interacted on screen. It's probably going to go that the Major Brothers are going to reunite and kind of do that whole thing, but with Brian Myers kind of going full heel with the, I am the most professional wrestler, and Matt Cardona operating in the face role against Ace Austin and Madman Fulton. It's going to be interesting to see who they kind of start to shift, if they shift at all, and bring together, or if they're going to let them kind of do their own singles things for right now and have those runs. Because I think we have enough of the old WWE tag teams reuniting in Impact Wrestling for right now, with Rhino and Heath kind of doing their thing. Um, I don't know. I kind of hope they let Matt just kind of run his own shop and do his own thing for now, and let him have that freedom that got him over in WWE initially. Because if you remember, he was an edgehead for the longest time, and then as part of the Major Brothers, when Brian got fired that first time, he was kind of left with nothing to do, which is when he became the internet champion, and kind of did the Z True Long Island story back in the early days of YouTube, and got himself so over with the fans that WWE had no choice but to put him on that main product. I mean, one of my favorite stories, I believe it's from SummerSlam, is when he's facing John Cena, and you're hearing more Zack Ryder chants than you're hearing John Cena, or even John Cena sucks, which is unheard of. Even when John Cena is no longer with the company, you hear John Cena sucks 30 times during a live show. And the fact that he was able to drown out the biggest guy at the height of his popularity just by what he was doing online, opening himself up to an Impact Wrestling where he's going to have that freedom to do what he wants, and also go to New Japan, and also still work with AEW if he chooses to, is going to be really, really interesting to see.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, well, first off, I think this is a huge grab by Impact Wrestling. Like,
Mm.
Zack Ryder or Matt Cardona is definitely a guy who you want on your side, just knowing how he was able to just get the crowd on his side in those social media days of 2011 and 2012 when the biggest guys were in the ring and people would still be chanting Zack Ryder. I remember, I think it was that Survivor Series tag team match, The Rock was in the ring, and
Mm-hmm.
even when The Rock is in the ring just cutting the promo of his life, they're chanting Zack Ryder. For the spotlight to be on you while The Rock is in the ring and you're probably not even backstage, that's huge. So if he can somehow duplicate that type of shine and bring it towards him, not only him in Impact, but put more eyes on Impact as a whole, then that's a perfect role for him. And on Ace Austin, I got be a part of the Ace Austin defense squad for a minute because I think, as far as just character wise and in ring stuff, he always impressed me immensely. Like, even this time last year, I think it was Hard to Kill last year. Him and I think it was Trey Miguel for the X Division Championship that opened that show, and I remember thinking that was my first runner up for not runner up, but like front runner for match of the year. Like, I think he's immensely talented wrestler in and out of the ring, and I can sort of get what you mean by Bush Light MJF, but I disagree with it. So I just had
And
to put that out.
that's entirely fair. It's just, I think my issue is more that when so I went to a lot of MLW tapings when they were coming down to, Dallas and DFW and all of that, and seeing MJF and Ace Austin kind of in the ring doing a very similar style, very, Ace Austin is much more flippy, but very similar, like heel work style where, I am the greatest heel wrestler in the world, and you know it and I know it, and that makes me better than you. watching them both work that style, but MJF just commit where Ace Austin was like, I'm incredible and I don't need to do flippy shit, but I'm going to because it's going to make you cheer for me. You know, just kind of that kind of wishy-washiness with that style of I'm the greatest, but I'm going to do my flippy shit anyway. Really endeared me to MJF because he can do the flippy shit. He just knows that he's good enough that he doesn't have to. Where Ace Austin, it feels like starts to get that to that point and then remembers that he likes the way it sounds when people cheer his name, so then he starts doing the 640s and the huge flips and the crazy shit. It's interesting, and that's actually going to bring us to our next match. So just remind me real quick, when you were actively watching wrestling and watching Impact, what were the years that you were active with the promotion? Like, when were you paying attention?
Like the most active or like the last time I was watching?
Both. Give me both.
Um, the most active I started watching like '07. That was back when Angle, Sting, AJ was there, and I was
Hmm.
really into it until I tuned out of wrestling like '08, '09, something like that. And then I would get back into it every now and again. But like '07, '08 was the period I was most watching. The last time I saw Impact was whenever I left Daily DT, July 2020, June 2020, something like that.
Okay. So you have a bit of a blind spot in there that is going to make this way less impactful, I think. Manic defeats Rohit Raju and Chris Bay for the X Division title. So this is a
Manic is
character.
Suicide, right?
No,
Formerly
Manic
Suicide.
is TJP's masked wrestler character.
Yeah, he used to be Suicide, but then they did like a rebranding type of thing. It's a long story of how they got that
Oh,
rebranding. Hulk Hogan was involved somehow, but
interesting.
they end one week he was Suicide, the next week he was unmasked, and he came back with the mask as Manic.
Hmm. That might explain why we haven't seen Suicide in a couple of weeks. Interesting. I must have missed that. But yeah, so there was a stipulation with the X Division where Rohit Raju, who's held the title down, basically said TJP is not allowed to challenge me for the title because I've beaten him and his title defenses are done. He doesn't get to do it anymore. And then at Final Resolution, Manic made his return, and it was all this like it was a bit of a comedy spot where like everyone knew TJP was Manic, and TJP knew that TJP was Manic, so they spent most of the match trying to unmask TJP and to prove that Manic and TJP are the same guy, so he can't be in this title match. Uh, the way they got around it and the way they got the ref to continue the match because they do successfully unmask him during this match that he wins the X Division title is TJP has face paint on underneath the mask. So where like Penta will paint his mouth, it's more think more Jushin Thunder Liger when he becomes Genshin Liger, and he's just got the white face paint all over his face, so you don't actually get a clear look at his face. It's very much that with a little bit of eye black, and so it's a perfect like recreation of the mask on his actual skin with face paint. So he wasn't ever technically unmasked. So the match was allowed to continue, and TJP wins the X Division title.
I really like that sub. Like that's super cool. And I always love the Liger sub when they did in '80s, '90s, whenever they do that. So if they duplicate that, I'm all behind that.
Absolutely. It was a really cool moment, especially because admittedly I'm not super familiar with early Impact Wrestling. I got like heavy into Impact around I covered Slammiversary 2018 for the website I worked at before you hired me. And I believe I sent you the piece I wrote for that show that got me hired. That was kind of around the time I first really got into Impact because I had to know the storylines going into Slammiversary and to do all of that. So I've really only followed the promotion closely for the last 3 or so years. So a lot of this like 2010, 2011 storyline stuff that they're revisiting while bringing older wrestlers back has been really interesting. So like I had no point of reference for Suicide. I had no point of reference for Manic or any of these characters, and seeing them kind of play out in front of my eyes is really, really cool. And that'll bring us to our next match, which is the Knockouts Championship match. Deonna Purrazzo, the current champion, defeats Taya Valkyrie. Now, what's interesting about this is right after this match happened, there were tons of rumors that immediately circulated that this was Taya's final match with the promotion, that she was done, that she was now officially, finally following her husband, Johnny not Johnny Wrestling, that's Johnny Gargano, John Morrison, who has been over in the WWE since just before the pandemic, and everyone kind of thought Taya was going to be following. It looks like she might finally be following, coming to the end of her contract. There's been no official word from Impact, no, best wishes and future endeavors kind of statement. So we don't know for sure. It may be that they're just in contract negotiations and she'll re-sign. I can't see Taya at this point in her career really walking away from Impact and starting over in the WWE. She's up there. She's like 33, 34 years old, which isn't that old, but with the style she works and everything like that. And then you have to consider that like Impact allows her, when it's safe to do so, to continue traveling into Mexico and working for AAA, where she is the Reinas de Reinas champion and kind of holding down their women's division. So it'll be interesting to see if she re-signs with Impact or follows the money and goes over to the WWE. So it does look like she is currently 37 years old, which is older than I would have thought. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what comes of this if she re-signs with the promotion and eventually finishes there as the greatest Impact knockout of all time, or if she goes to WWE and tries to do something with ideally the last 4 to 5 years of her career.
I can sort of see her leaving just on grounds that she's done so much in Impact already as like the longest reigning champion. Like she's obviously got other commitments in other countries with like other championships, but like you said, if she's near the end of her career, there may be some WWE related stuff she may want to mark off that bucket list, and obviously she may just want to be close to her husband, just as she was in Lucha Underground and Impact Wrestling. Though, quick question. Didn't Su Yun win the Knockouts Championship at Bound for Glory, or am I going crazy?
She did, and then she almost immediately dropped it back to Deonna Purrazzo.
Oh,
It was what we initially thought it was going to be after Bound for Glory, where it was just kind of a stat pad. Like, you've been here, you haven't left, you haven't gone anywhere, you've been a loyal person, even when like our women's division was a joke, and now that it's no longer a joke, we're going to give you that title. And Su Young is doing some really cool character work right now. She was Susie for the longest time. She is now Susan. So she's the adult version of Susie. It's real interesting. I'm not sure where they're gonna go with it. But yeah. So
okay. I'm
yeah.
curious about Susan now. What exactly does that mean? Like she's like an older Susie now. Like,
Uh, she's Susie in that she's not evil and like an undead bride, but she's wearing like street clothes. She's got like the blazer on and like the red undershirt, and she has like the moments where like if you piss her off, she goes into that Sue Young and like I'm gonna rip your fucking face off with my teeth kind of moment. But it's a progression of the Susie character, because the Susie character mostly worked because you had Kylie Ray. You had Kylie Ray there to kind of balance out the Susie, like, oh gosh, I don't know what's happening, you know, butterflies and rainbows kind of character. And now that Kylie Ray is gone, Susie has kind of morphed into Susan, who is just Taya without the bitchiness, basically.
okay, so is she like all three characters now, or is she just Susan?
So to my understanding, she is just Susan and then like has those flashes of Sue Young, kind of the way that Susie did. I haven't seen Susie in a while, but it could just be that she appeared briefly the way Sue Young does and I missed it. But yeah, to my understanding, she is just Sue Young and Susan right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. Impact is one of my favorite shows of the week because they are allowed to do just weird shit.
Oh yeah, same here. That's what I always loved about Impact. That's the fact they distinguish themselves so drastically from like the big competition, AEW, WWE, rather than do similar storylines. They went more like a Lucha Underground route and just went completely wacky soap opera, even like
Mm.
killing characters off. It's so
Oh
wild.
yeah. Absolutely. And that brings us to our next match, which is Eddie Edwards facing off with Sami Callihan in a barbed wire massacre match. This was dope. Eddie Edwards comes out with the victory. This was brutal and bloody and rough. It's something that you would have expected on like a CZW card or like an IWA Mid South or one of those kind of niche promotions that this is all they do and they do it well. But this was out of nowhere, bloody and brutal and violent and just really, really good. Really well done.
Okay, so this was like I guess the hardcore intermission, so to speak, basically, where you just take a break in the middle of a card from the normal wrestling, and then just whack each other over the head with weed whackers, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. This was Sami Callihan and Eddie Edwards are great technical wrestlers, but you all know them outside of Impact for the fact that they will regularly kill themselves and each other for your edification. So that's what we're going to do here for 25 minutes is just let them throw each other into barbed wire. And it was really, really solid. It is nice to see Eddie and Sami be allowed to kind of return to their roots of the death match, like hardcore style that got them the notoriety that ended up with them in Impact Wrestling, and Impact kind of allowing them to do that, especially when you have people like Elena Black and John Moxley signed to places like AEW and WWE, where less so in AEW's uh, purview, but WWE, they'll sign you as a deathmatch wrestler, and then you'll never be bloodied or kind of touched in any kind of brutal way again. I guess one real good point with that would be Candice LeRae, who blew up on the indie scene, having I think the only death match of the Young Bucks career, where they had the thumbtacks in their boots during the match and having the crimson mask and just being a tough son of a bitch and coming to WWE and kind of losing all of that character that she had and kind of having to start over from scratch. So it's nice to see that Impact is allowing these guys to do what gave them notice in the first place. So that'll actually bring us to the main event of Hard to Kill, which was the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega reuniting on Impact TV with fellow stable members, the Good Brothers, facing off against Impact World Champion Rich Swann, who was backed up by Chris Sabin and was meant to be backed up by Chris Sabin's tag team partner, but due to injury was backed up by Moose. This was an okay match. The most important part of this match is how it ended, which was with the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega pinning Rich Swann clean in the center of the ring, probably setting up for like a two belts and maybe even possibly a unification, because there have been rumblings that AEW is in talks to purchase Impact Wrestling and kind of absorb that whole company. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or if that's just some kayfabe stuff that has been kind of brought forward with the whole uh, Impact and AEW kind of feuding and going to war on the commercials for the actual show. But yeah, so that's been a rumor going around that there talks with AEW purchasing Impact, its full library, and all of their wrestler contracts, which I think would be a great move on behalf of AEW, less so on Impact, because they would have that streaming service already ready built in and be able to kind of launch the AEW network that we've heard rumors about, and they would honestly triple their ability to put on good women's matches in that company, which they have struggled with in the last year and a half.
I 100% agree with you there. That would be wild if it happened. That's a huge rumor to me. But like if it does happen, I can definitely see a lot of potential there. But focusing on the match itself, imagine Kenny Omega pinning Rich Swann. That to me that makes perfect sense because for one thing, if Impact where they're going to be absolved by AEW or not, you want to continue that working relationship. So you might as well, if you have, in my head, I'm thinking that if you have the AEW championship, get a big win over the Impact champion, then that creates a little bit more trust there, and maybe AEW will be more willing to have someone do the favors, like return the favors, like have the Impact champion come over to AEW and pin somebody on Dynamite, so to speak. So I think that it opens a lot of doors, and of course, it just continues that feud. And if they're doing either a one-on-one title thing or a double title match, title unification, however they do it, that's always a good thing too. So it seems like a lot of ways to just progress towards the future.
Absolutely. It'll definitely be interesting to see in the coming months if AEW is able to maintain this working relationship with Impact, if Impact gets absorbed, and if Impact gets absorbed, what that does with Impact's supposed working relationship with All Elite Wrestling, because we know that Impact, or not Impact, New Japan and All Elite have a lot of tension between them because it's been disclosed that Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks kind of left All Elite or New Japan in a bit of a lurch by being like, "Oh, hey, by the way, we're gone and we're starting a rival company," and just sort of riding off into the sunset and really, really piss them off. And if there's one wrestling company that can hold a grudge like no other, it is New Japan Pro Wrestling. So it'll be interesting to see what that kind of does to the landscape of professional wrestling in the U.S. if it actually goes forward. All right, and that'll bring us over to probably my favorite wrestling show of the week, which was SmackDown. So SmackDown opens up with Bryan facing off against Cesaro in a one-on-one match. Cesaro gets the victory clean. The interesting part about this is that commentary all throughout the celebration following the match is saying that this is a career-defining victory for Cesaro, which to me kind of indicates that he's about to get a massive push or that he's about to be kind of done with the company. I don't think he's done. I don't think he's ready to be done or in a position where he's going to be let go. So I'm excited to see if he kind of walks into WrestleMania with this huge push, either for a US or IC title or maybe even for the world title.
I'd be shocked if he's about to leave the company because he's still, or at least he looks relatively young. So the most thing that would make sense would be like a big push, which like he's way overdue for a big push. I still feel like he should have got that big push either when he won the first Andre Battle Royal at Mania 3, or like a year later when he was having the US Open title matches with John Cena. Like he was on like a hot streak of being over, and WWE just kind of like stopped with him for no reason. So like if they're going to do like a singles push for him, might as well do it now while he can still go at whatever age he is.
Yeah, no, I agree. Cesaro is 40 years old, by the way.
Oh,
So he's probably, maybe not right now, but probably is going to start winding down his career. A lot of the guys that got us into pro wrestling when we were young, so like the Cesaro, the Sheamuses, obviously Daniel Bryan and John Cena are all getting up there in age and starting to take steps back. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But I definitely agree that if he is going to end up leaving the company because he's been around for so long and been such a good, solid worker, the company would most likely reward him with one final massive push before he leaves.
yeah, I would have never thought he was 4 years old. He's looked exactly the same for like a decade. I think he's been in WWE for about a decade now, so 4 years surprising.
Yeah, no, it's definitely crazy, but then you also remember that he was in like Kings of Pro Wrestling. He was in that team for almost a decade itself before they got signed by the WWE and then split up and put in FCW. So the fact that he is old enough to have been an FCW guy and show up in NXT and have almost a decade long run in the WWE while also having this incredible indie career really just kind of puts into perspective how young he was when he got on to everybody's radar.
Yeah, in that case, that's even more reason why they should give him like a big push. Because at 4 years old, I don't know how many more years he's got left in the tank.
Exactly, exactly. But speaking of big pushes on the horizon, we had Apollo Crews beating Sami Zayn clean in a one-on-one match. This was an interesting match because you had Big E, who's the current IC title holder, on commentary doing his Big E thing, just kind of lounging, watching the match go by, not really talking. After the match, Apollo Crews comes down off the ring apron grabs the IC title belt and just is kind of looking at it, and Big E immediately gets in his face and rips the belt away, and they're just kind of shouting at each other. This is also interesting because in the last couple of weeks, Apollo has been kind of teasing becoming a Paul Heyman guy. He's had conversations with Jey Uso, Paul Heyman, and Roman Reigns all on screen in recent weeks about coming in. And I think if he's able to Paul, that is able to finagle him a IC title match with Big E, either at WrestleMania or maybe a smaller pay-per-view leading into WrestleMania. That's a very good way to put that strap on him, get it off Big E, and allow him to kind of focus on the WWE Championship or the Universal title and kind of move those storylines along while giving Apollo the push that he richly deserves. So it's going to be really interesting here in the next couple of months, because if they're going to do it and give Big E a WrestleMania moment this year, they've got to do it fast, since WrestleMania is only 3 months away.
I agree, and the prospect of Apollo being a Paul Heyman guy is really interesting. It's hard for me to really see it just because it's hard for me to see him as a heel, even though he doesn't have to worry about the whole mouthpiece aspect of it when he just has Paul Heyman talking for him. When I look at Apollo Crews, he just looks like a baby face, so it's hard for me to picture him in that more aggressive heel role.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing they're doing with the Apollo character, is that he's not necessarily a heel, he's just tired. He's at that point where he's like, man, I've been in this company for years. I've done what you asked for years. I'm not getting the title opportunities I feel I deserve. I'm one of your most talented athletes. I'm clearly one of your strongest athletes. Give me the moment that I feel I deserve. It's very similar to the way Sheamus and Cesaro and the Bar kind of got started, where neither of them were having very successful singles runs. So they said, you know what? Fuck it. Let's do this together. And they went on to be one of the most successful WWE tag teams of the 2010s. It's going to be interesting, especially with Jimmy still on the shelf. If they bring Apollo in and kind of have Jay and Apollo kind of run roughshod over the tag team division as Roman Reigns kind of guys in his stable with Paul Heyman as the mouthpiece, and that's kind of how they do it. Or if they bring him in and have Apollo hold a secondary title similar to what is the Hurt Business over on Raw, where they're kind of a secondary title grouping with MVP kind of running the show over there. All right, and SmackDown ended with Adam Pearce signing his Universal title match contract at Royal Rumble. Now, throughout the night, Adam Pearce has been kind of approached by Paul Heyman and asked to sign the contract. He would wave him off. Then Paul would go to Roman. Roman would wave him off. And it all kind of culminated in Paul in the ring telling Adam Pearce that it was now going to be a last man standing match. Now, because it was going to be a last man standing match, you got it in your gut that, oh god, Roman's just going to kill this guy on national TV and move on. It's going to be a 30-second like piss break match, and that's going to suck. But Adam Pearce did some really interesting work here, where he said, as a WWE official or former official in Paul's case, and this is all quoted, you know that every WWE contract says the same thing: card subject to change. And his knee, he'd been playing up his knee injury from the NWA all night. Throughout the night, he'd be rubbing his knee and stretching out his knee and be like, oh, this hurts. This really, really hurts. And he goes, well, if the card is subject to change and my knee hurts and leaves me incapable of competing as a WWE official, I have come up with a suitable replacement. Kevin Owens' music hits. He comes down full force, just power walking, just angry Kev with something to prove, signs the contract, and then gets right in Roman's face, and the show goes off the air. So it's looking like instead of Adam Pearce and Roman Reigns, we're getting Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens in a last man standing match at the Royal Rumble, in a situation where they can go all over the Thunderdome, tear that place apart, and it should be amazing.
That's a really great setup. It's a really different setup to like do like the what do you call the hokey doke switcheroo type of deal. And I like how they have the callback to like his NWA injury. It's like that's really cool in itself. My only concern is like did it kind of come off as random that Kevin Owens of all people would be the one to replace Adam Pearce?
I don't think so if you've been paying attention, because Roman and Kevin have had the basically ongoing feud that gets put on pause every couple of months for the last like 3 years, and Kevin Owens has never really gotten another Universal title shot since losing the title way back when he did, because he won it. I believe he was the one who won it after it was vacated by Finn Balor. And then he lost it pretty quickly after that, and it became sort of the Legends title for a couple of years. So he's definitely coming in with a lot of piss and vinegar, and like, that's my title. I want that title back. I never got a fair shot to get it back. I want it back. I'm going to kill you to get it back. And this is kind of that perfect medium for Kevin Owens, where you're not tied to his ability in the ring. He is very good in the ring. No one is saying he is not, but you're not tied to him staying in the ring. He can climb on things and leap off things and do crazy shit in the Royal Rumble that he would not be able to do if you were in a stadium of like 100,000 people in a baseball stadium somewhere. The ability to him having an empty stadium and allowing him to kind of explore and do crazy stuff here, I think is going to make it a much better match than it would have been otherwise, with cameras like running around through people trying to film, sort of like the Miz and Shane O'Mac last man standing match that we had at last year's Royal Rumble.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like when you put it that way, it makes sense. Like you said, they've had that history in the last few years, so it's that type of history where like you could stop and then just pick it up whenever you want. And I think the last time they made wrestled was, I might have been back when Owens was still with Jericho. I vaguely remember a Hell in a Cell match maybe, and I think they had a last man standing match at like Rumble 2017, 2016, whenever that was. So the fact they get to revisit this feud and the roles are pretty much reversed, with this time Kevin Owens being the babyface and Roman Reigns being the heel, I think that's cool. So the fact they can do it like this in such a unique way, I think it sets up for a really good match at the Rumble.
Absolutely. If they follow through and if they don't pull a double switcheroo on us where they're just like, hey, we're doing this and it's going to be great. And then, oh, actually, Adam Pearce is fine to wrestle. As long as they don't do that to us, it'll be fine. The last time they had a singles match, it looks like, was December 22nd of last year. And then they had one in 2018, and then before that it was 2017, 2016, when they were like hot and heavy all over each other. But the one they had in December of last year was a 4-star match according to Dave Meltzer, and has a average user rating of 8.5 according to cagematch.com. So when these two get in the ring together, they're gonna kill it. Speaking of the Rumble, this, and you might be able to shed some light on this for me. This seems like the least announced Rumble that we've ever gone into. We have 5 men and 5 women currently announced for entering the Rumble, which is taking place on Sunday night. So unless they're just going to be slews of announcements on Friday night for SmackDown, it really feels like we're going to go in with a lot of unanswered questions.
Oh, I didn't know the Rumble was this Sunday. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so
coming up soon.
yeah, and you said just 5 men and 5 women?
I believe that's correct. Let me triple check that, but yeah.
Okay, while you triple check that, I'll say the only thing I can think off top of why they haven't announced more people is either one, I guess the more grim reason is because of COVID. They may be trying to just figure out who's in and who's not for in this COVID pandemic time, who can travel and whatnot, and they may still be trying to figure that out. Maybe trying to figure out how you do a socially distanced rumble, if that's even necessary. But yeah, that's really the only reason that could come to mind. Like, I usually like, well, actually, I take it back. Another reason, like, as I say that, another reason is that maybe they finally learned from past mistakes. Like, a common thing every year is that people complain that WWE would basically give out half of the Rumble participants before the Rumble. Like, the average Rumble year, they may give away 20 of the participants or 15 of the participants. For them to only do 5 in each match, they may have, it gives them more leeway for surprises, I think. So if they finally
Yeah.
figured out, hey, maybe we shouldn't give away half of the match before it happens, and just a half of the exciting part about the Rumble is a surprise, then maybe they're just finally learning from that mistake.
Yeah, and it looks like for the Men's Royal Rumble, they have 6 total announcements made. Daniel Bryan, Elias, Bobby Lashley, Randy Orton, Otis, Riddle, AJ Styles, Cesaro, and Jey Uso. And then for the Women's Royal Rumble, there's 7 currently announced. That's Charlotte Flair, Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, Bianca Belair, Bayley, Dana Brooke, and Mandy Rose. So it's looking like there's going to be a ton of people filled out from like the NXT roster just because I honestly, if you asked me to name 24 other active men's wrestlers on the WWE side that don't already have a match at Royal Rumble, I don't know that I'd be able to do it, which is sad. Um, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do, and I do hope they have interesting surprises and shocking returns. Maybe this is when we get Jimmy to return full time to the roster. Maybe this is when we get some of our NXT call ups that haven't really been seen to make their full time debuts, and they just become main roster competitors from the jump. Maybe this is how we get Naomi back on the full time roster. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know that I trust them to do 24 surprises well, though, is the thing.
True, but
47 when you consider both Royal Rumbles, but yeah, I don't know that I trust them to do all those surprises well and have them mean as much as they could if we knew who was coming and what order they were coming in.
I also feel like it's hard to mess up a surprise. Like the good thing with surprises is that like you even if you look back in retrospect and you're kind of like, oh, that was like a dumb surprise. In the moment, at least 9 times out of 10, you're like, oh my God, it's
Hmm.
blah 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 blah. So like it's it's so hard to mess up a surprise. I think that even if they do have 25 surprise slots, even if it's whether it's returning wrestlers or returning legends, returning Hall of Famers, however they do it, they the people are gonna, if not appreciate the surprise, and at least be surprised. And I think that's the main thing about Rumble Surprise. You want to be surprised.
That's fair. It'll be interesting to see how the internet reacts because I don't think I don't. It's not that I don't think. I know there's no chance that they're going to live up to last year's Rumble. That was probably my favorite Rumble of all time. You had the return of Edge. You had the entire storyline with Brock Lesnar and Drew McIntyre. Uh, so I think it would be foolish of them to try and not even necessarily one up, but meet the same expectations because there's no one in the roster, past or present, that I can think of that would make their return that would have that same gut punch impact as Edge unless like The Rock came back to promote like his new show on CBS that he's doing right now or anything like that. I don't see anyone in recent memory that isn't currently signed with Impact or AEW that could return or make a debut that would really make the world go crazy unless Jay White debuts on Sunday night.
That's fair too, but a counterpoint I would say is that like what made last year's Rumble so great is that most of their Rumble had a story to it. Like the big story was who's going to topple the beast. The Brock Lesnar wasn't never easily toppled, but then you have a Rumble where from the first entrant he's knocking people out one by one by one, whether they're fall Hall of Famer or just an on roster wrestler. He was just chucking them back and forth, and then when somebody does, it's kind of okay. Now who's going to topple this guy? Like, is he going to make it to the end? And there was an excitement to it. If WWE could somehow create a unique storyline like that this year, then I think there's a chance that this year could topple next year, especially with the extra element of surprise or extra surprise compared to past years.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And so that's going to bring us over to NXT, where we had the continuation of the Men's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic and the beginning of the Women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. So the first match for the Men's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic was Kushida and Leon Ruff facing off against The Way, which was Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory. Kushida and Leon Ruff pull out the win on this one, which I thought was a huge upset. Kushida and Leon Ruff look strong. They look like they're firing on all cylinders and they're really working well together. I could see them making a really deep run in this tournament, especially after putting away a team where in recent years would have almost been guaranteed a final spot in Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory.
Yeah, I can definitely see that though. I just got backtrack. I did not know they were doing a women's Dusty Road tournament this year. That is super cool. Like, do they have like a prize at the end of that, or is it just like the men's where they just give you a trophy?
So I believe it's just a trophy. There have been uh there not rumors. There's been a lot of call online for this to be a guaranteed women's tag team title match at the next big pay-per-view. So like if you win the women's Dusty Rhodes Classic, you challenge at well, I guess the next closest pay-per-view that matters is going to be WrestleMania, which could be a cool way to like fill out that card. Uh but I haven't seen anything for certain on there. I have seen some people saying that if you're going to say it's an all divisions title and then not come to NXT, you should just give NXT a women's tag team title, which I tend to agree, especially since you have NXT and NXT UK doing really interesting stuff with their women's divisions right now. Just give them women's tag team titles. You've already got enough title bloat over on NXT that two more really isn't going to make that much of a difference. Okay, so we're going to keep it moving with the first women's Dusty Tag Team Classic match, which saw Toni Storm and Mercedes Martinez facing off against Casey Catanzaro and Caden Carter. This was a really good match. This was one of those rare Toni Storm matches where it actually kind of lived up to the hype that people had built around it. Casey Catanzaro and Caden Carter, I think shockingly for a lot of people, came away with the victory on this one, knocking out Toni Storm and Mercedes Martinez. But they've been a tag team for almost a year at this point. They've been working primarily as a tag team. Casey Catanzaro, aside from being like the Royal Rumble specialist, has become very much a tag team wrestling specialist and has really excelled in like the last year since she's kind of moved to being a tag team wrestler. So this was really, really solid. Casey Catanzaro and Caden Carter are probably my pick for who's going to, if not win the entire thing, end up on one half of that ring in that final for that women's tag team classic. I can't think of any tag team that's on that bracket, and I'm pulling it up right now so we can talk about it, that has more chemistry and more history in the ring than those two. So we have Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell, which is the Way but females, facing off with Gigi Dolan and Cora Jade, who are two indie signings that have happened recently that are going to be making their returns. I believe that match is taking place next week. You have Shotzi Blackheart and Ember Moon, who are going to be facing off with Marina Shafir and Zoe Stark. Zoe Stark is another indie signing. Marina Shafir, obviously one of the four horsewomen of MMA, who has made the transition to pro wrestling in recent years. So Zoe Stark is actually the new name for the Lacey Ryan, who was announced to have been signed on Wednesday. So I guess that answers that question about if they're going to be making new debuts. Jessamine Duke is not currently injured, but she is shifting focus to producing content for Up Up Down Down right now. So she's not working in ring right now, but is, I guess, working as a internet producer and content like creator for Up Up Down Down. I've noticed she's shown up a lot more on content recently, but that's interesting. That's a cool opportunity for her if she got there and signed a contract and realized she's not really a big fan of pro wrestling in that kind of way, but they're still giving her the opportunity to do things within the company, and it could just be a for now thing. But that's really interesting. But yeah, and then the other corner of the bracket sees Aaliyah and Jesse Kamea, who are going to be facing off with Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez, also assumedly in the coming weeks. This is going to be really interesting to see these teams kind of face off.
Yeah, a lot of interesting pairings. I'm very curious to see like how they would like mesh up together because a lot of them are, well, some of them at least are names that like, okay, that makes sense, like Dakota Kai, Raquel Gonzalez, but other ones are just very different, so to speak. And like I'm noticing a few like contrasting styles in these pairings, so I think that's interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, that also might be what makes a really good tag team. I mean, the Rockers were phenomenal because Marty Jannetty didn't do a lot of flippy shit. He left that to Shawn Michaels and he just beat the hell out of you on the mat. So it might be that they're just playing with those kinds of dynamics with their women's tag team division, which I think kind of sets them apart from like the Impact tag team division and especially the AEW non-existent women's tag team division, where Impact has a tendency to pair up people who look similar and work similar styles, and let them kind of do their thing. Where I think it'd be interesting to have kind of that dueling style in NXT.
I'd agree with that. It's very much like an opposites attract type of thing. Like some of the best tag teams you can probably name are two characters who are like, they make no sense together, but in the ring they mesh really well somehow.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that'll bring us to our final NXT match, which was the final men's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic match of the night. And a really interesting match. So you had Lucha House Party facing off against Imperium. On paper, it's an Imperium squash, right?
Right?
On paper, yes. You're wrong, though, because Lucha House Party comes away with the victory and advances in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic over Imperium, which is wild. To me, it feels like they're setting Imperium up to kind of go over to NXT UK and rejoin with Walter, who's still holding down NXT UK as the NXT UK champion, and kind of reform their stable again. Because he's still rocking the Imperium black and silver. They're rocking the Imperium black and silver, but they haven't interacted since the pandemic. So I think that's maybe why they're kind of sending them out on their backs after a loss to Lucha House Party, who was teasing a breakup for months and months, and then that kind of fell apart. This was a good match. It was very lucha versus like British strong style kind of stuff, which was really cool to see. I'm always happy to see my Flippy boys get a victory. It sucks that they're going to lose next week, but I'm always happy to see my Flippy boys get a victory.
I don't know. At this rate, seems like the tournament is like really diving into like really surprising upsets. You were just telling me that Casey and Caden beat Mercedes Martinez and Tony Storm. I think you were telling me about another upset. Sorry, my memory's just terrible at this point. But it seems like you were telling me a lot of upsets happened in this bracket. And if those upsets go straight into the finals, then they may just be trying to pan out like an unpredictable tournament, it sounds like.
Yeah, and that could be true. They may have taken notes from the last couple tournaments where it was like Undisputed Era is clearly going to be in the finals, and making changes. Which, if that's the case, that's awesome. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. And that's going to bring us to AEW. This was the worst episode that AEW's ever done. It was not. It was bad, man. It was really, really bad. It felt disjointed and weird. Uh, the only two things that are really worth mentioning were that the women's title tournament eliminator tournament was announced. So over the next couple of weeks, similar to what Impact has been doing with their tag team tournament, it's going to be a single elimination tournament for the women's title. Uh, Facing off, I guess, against Hikaru Shida because she hasn't renounced the title, so she's getting a pass to the finals. I don't know. It's weird. It sort of feels like they're doing a, not on a boo boo. You say we don't have enough women's wrestling, which they don't. They only had one women's match on this card. Uh, so we're just going to do an entire tournament and you guys can't bitch. But knowing them, the entire tournament, like their tag team tournament earlier this year, is going to be entirely on YouTube and like 20,000 people are going to watch it.
But like I also just have to ask, like I know you hate talking about bad wrestling, but like what made this episode so bad?
It was just weird and disjointed. And actually, why I hated this episode is going to become clear very quickly. So the episode ended with MJF and Jericho teaming up against Sammy Guevara and Jake Hager, teaming up against Santana and Ortiz to determine who the Inner Circle's official tag team would be. MJF and Jericho win the match, and then AEW just hard cuts off the air. And it starts like Jurassic Park or something. So they win the match, they're announced as the winners, and then it's hard cut off the air and done. So they were either way over time or this is a story that's being built up. It was weird, man. It was the best AEW wrestling that happened this week happened on Impact Wrestling.
Why are they even like fighting to have like an official tag team, especially when there is an official tag team in the stable and the other two are like random pairings?
Uh, because they need something to keep Chris Jericho on TV, I guess. I don't know. It's really weird. It feels really early like NWO issues where it was like, oh, the NWO is cool. People like the NWO. Let's bring all of our people into the NWO. Oh crap, no one is against the NWO now, so there's nothing to do anymore. I guess they could fight each other. That could be cool. It feels like MJF and Wardlow, like weeks after joining the stable, are getting ready to kind of break off and do their own thing and either take someone with them or start building their own super duper heel stable. And it's really interesting. Well, not even interesting. It's really boring because you have the Dark Order who's doing the evil thing, but they're doing it well because they're funny and they're actually funny. And then you have Chris Jericho, who, with his order, like his stable, is trying to do the funny thing with like the release the dogs against Matt Hardy, and it was a bunch of Pomeranians and all this kind of like weird kitschy stuff. This is old, like when Matt Hardy debuted.
I'd say, like, did we talk about this? I don't remember
Yes.
this.
Very briefly, we talked about Matt Hardy debuting and telling Chris Jericho that he wasn't going to join the Inner Circle and sending his drone to turn in the Inner Circle t-shirt, and then Chris Jericho getting out of a hot tub in blue jeans and saying release the dogs, and like a pack of Pomeranians chasing this drone off of his property. This was a thing we discussed. But yeah, no, it feels weird. It feels like they don't know what to do with all of these massive contracts they signed these people to, so they're just putting them in stables so that they can't go to the WWE. It's bad, man. It's really, really bad. It was not a good episode of AEW. I haven't watched Dark yet, so I don't know if those make up for the bad episodes of AEW just yet. They usually do. There's usually really good wrestling on AEW Dark. But yeah, no, it wasn't good. I don't know. I don't know if it was just I was fatigued or what it was, but I didn't enjoy this week's AEW at all.
Well, to your credit, like, just hearing it and like me not being fatigued, it sounds horrible, the episode. So I can imagine like actually seeing it in execution, because just audibly it just sounds really bad.
Yeah, no, it was super weird. But speaking of good AEW wrestling on Impact Wrestling had the return of Matt Hardy because he re-debuted with the Private Party to face off against James Storm and Chris Sabin, who James Storm with Impact Wrestling again. He made his debut this week. So the rumors we heard about him signing with WWE, apparently nothing to those anymore. Um, so they were in a number one contenders match for the Impact Tag Team titles. Private Party comes away victorious and is going to be facing the Good Brothers, who are the current Impact Tag Team champions for the Impact Tag Team titles, most likely on AEW in coming weeks.
That was a lot, but that
Yeah.
actually sounds really amazing. Like all these re-debuts and debuts, like they really lean to like the crossover at this time. So like it seems like they're really like kicking into the high gear.
Oh yeah, no, the worries that everyone had that like Kenny Omega was going to show up as a favor to Don Callis and then everyone was going to disappear forever apparently don't seem to be true, which is why people are really leaning into this like, oh, Tony Khan might actually buy Impact Wrestling and keep them separate, but like maybe rebrand them as the third and fourth hour of AEW that he's been saying is coming to TV soon, and maybe that's how they bring that in, and all that kind of stuff, which could be interesting. I don't know. I think AEW Impact would be intriguing, like AEW colon Impact, kind of like AEW colon. I don't know. I'm losing my mind at this point, man. But yeah, no, it was a really solid match. It was cool seeing James Storm back in Impact Wrestling. I wish they had been able to hold off on Matt Hardy's return until they were able to have fans in the audience. I get that sometimes the story they like necessitates a return when there's not going to be fans there, and that sucks. So you have to move on. I really, really hope that we at some point get Matt Hardy walking in to an Impact arena full of people and just losing their minds. It would
Same
be
here.
so, so good.
I feel bad for the guy because like the week that he debuted in AEW was like the week that COVID hit. It was like the first no fan episode. Now he's getting his Impact return, and it's again no fan episode. Like I hope like within the next year or so he at least gets something in front of some fans, man.
Absolutely. Hopefully the guy doesn't finish his career in empty stadiums. I don't think he will. After his scare with the concussion and the fact that he pissed his wife off very publicly about the scare with the concussion. He seems to be working a much safer style in that he's not really working at all. He's mostly managing Private Party, and he seems to have kind of come face to face with his mortality and made a decision to keep himself healthy in the long run, which I think is really, really beneficial. And that is actually going to bring us to the end of the show, where we're going to talk about my indie watch list. So I watch a lot of wrestling, obviously. I watch a lot of indie wrestling. And this is going to be the first time that I'm recommending that you watch something that has not aired yet. So IWA Mid-South is airing You Can't Keep a Good Thing Down, which is actually being recorded right now on their YouTube channel for free at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. So you go to the IWA Mid-South YouTube channel and you'll be able to see that. And there might be someone on that card who's going to be appearing on Lap Scraps very, very soon. You'll just have to stick around and find out. But that's going to be airing at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time on the IWA Mid-South YouTube channel, and then being aired or edited probably and added to IWTV in the coming weeks. If you're not feeling the Royal Rumble, switch over to the Mid-South YouTube channel, or like I'm probably going to do, have them both open and just enjoy some really good hardcore wrestling on your YouTubes.
All right, nice. And shout out to that mysterious special guest. I wonder who it can be.
I have no idea, Joe. No idea at all.
That brings me back to my usual segment. Is wrestling... Oh wow, this really is a bizarre day. What do I call the segment?
Is wrestling worth getting into at this time right
That's the
now?
one.
I think is the one, the way you say it.
That's the one. So I guess from all I'm hearing, I'd say now is definitely a good time to get back into wrestling. Because one, they're really amping up the whole AEW versus Impact stuff. And it sounds like they're getting into like some really interesting, exciting territory. Nonetheless, nonetheless, neglecting the fact that you got James Storm coming back and you got Matt Hardy coming back. Private Party coming on Impact, the AEW champion pinning the Impact champion, like a lot of exciting things on that regard, and they're getting closer and closer to those dream matches that people really want to see. So you want to tune in there, and of course Royal Rumble this Sunday. Like Royal Rumble, I was talking last week about how Royal Rumble is a good time to get into wrestling. Like it kind of works as like the playoffs if you are into regular like basketball watcher. Playoffs is a good time to like ease yourself back into it right before the big shindig, being in that context the finals. In this context, the big shindig is WrestleMania. So it doesn't hurt to get back into it right before Mania and just as things get really exciting for the Rumble.
Absolutely. This is a great time, I think, to skip AEW, watch Impact, and watch the Royal Rumble.
That too.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. You can follow me on Twitter at Gladen, Sam. That's GladenCommSam, and read my coverage of all things pro wrestling at dailyddt.com, sportskita.com. Basically anywhere that I'm writing, it's going to end up on my Twitter, and there's a link there with all my stuff and the archives of my old stuff, and just go to my Twitter. It's all there. It'll be fine.
And if you know some very incoherent this episode, if you want some slightly more coherent commentary from me, but still isn't very good, then you may want to follow me on Twitter at WhamBamIsJam or Instagram at WhamBamIsJam. Pretty much everywhere that's at WhamBamIsJam. I also have another podcast, Mental Health Check-In Podcast, which is also under the umbrella of the Uplift United Podcast Network, which also includes this podcast. And if you want to donate some money, you can subscribe to our Patreon or donate some change over on our Ko-fi page. Go to at Uplift United and upliftunited.com. I think that's everything. That's a lot of plugs that I had to get in, but I feel like I'm forgetting something, but that's everything, I think.
No, I think that works out. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a rating and a review if possible. It really seriously does help us out. You can follow the show on Twitter at LapsedGraps. That's LAPSEDGRAPS. And until next time,
We
we
out.
out.